All right, diving in, we've got a stack of research here all about how our brains learn and, how we actually hang on to information. And I gotta say, the stuff you guys sent in really got me thinking.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff, right? I mean, we're talking about the nitty-gritty of how reading like actual books, not just skimming headlines, how that impacts your brain and ultimately, how well you'll learn.
Exactly. And we're gonna break it all down. No jargon, just the good stuff, the stuff that matters, so you can actually, use it.
Absolutely. We've got articles, excerpts, all sorts of research here, really focusing on this connection between reading and how your brain makes sense of the world.
Hmm.
And our mission today is to sift through all of that and give you those key takeaways, those aha moments, the
Yeah.
stuff you can walk away with and think, okay, this is how I can actually learn better.
I love that. Aha moments. Okay, so one of the first things that jumped out at me from all this research is this idea that reading, it's not just passive, right? It's not like watching TV where you're just kind of absorbing. It feels like your brain is actively like constructing something, building.
You hit the nail on the head there.
Right.
Reading is an active process. Absolutely. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
your brain's not just a sponge soaking things up. It's more like
Yeah.
it's building a model.
Yeah.
It's taking these words, these ideas, and it's weaving them into your existing knowledge.
Right, so it's connecting to what you already know. It's not just isolated facts floating around in there.
Exactly. And one of the key players in all of this is something called the default mode network. It sounds a little intimidating, I know.
EMN.
Right, the DMN.
Yeah.
But think of it like your brain's internal storyteller. It's the network that's active when you're daydreaming, reflecting, or, as it turns out, when you're deeply engrossed in the book. And what it does is it helps connect those new ideas from the book to your memories, your past experiences. It helps you make sense of it all on a personal level.
So it's like the book is giving you the building blocks, and the DMN is figuring out how to fit them into your existing uh, mental structure.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a great way to put it. It's like
Yeah.
you're not just memorizing facts, you're integrating them into your understanding of the world.
Yeah.
And that's huge because that's what makes knowledge stick. That's what makes it meaningful.
Makes total sense. And, the research also talks about this idea of brain page development, which I thought was pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. Brain page development. That's a core concept here. Think of it like this. Every time you read, you're essentially creating these unique pathways in your brain specifically for that information. It's like you're building a mental map.
So as you're reading, your brain is laying down these like neural pathways, making it easier to access that information later on.
You got it. It's like creating a well-worn path in the woods. The more you walk it, the easier it is to follow. And the same goes for your brain. The more you revisit certain information, the stronger those neural connections become, and the easier it is to recall that knowledge.
It's a really powerful visual, isn't it? Like you're literally shaping your brain through reading.
Yeah, it's amazing. It underscores how active this process is. You're not just a passive recipient, you're an architect, building these structures of knowledge in your mind.
So we've talked about how reading actively engages the brain, but one of the benefits that really caught my eye was how reading can make you a better speaker. Now, how does that work? It's not like I'm practicing public speaking while I'm reading silently on the couch,
Right.
right?
But here's the thing. Reading works on your language skills from multiple angles. Even if you're not speaking out loud, your brain is still processing language, absorbing it, and refining those underlying skills.
So it's like a subtle form of practice almost.
Yeah, exactly. Think about vocabulary, for instance. Every time you read, you're exposed to new words, new phrases, and you see how they're used in context. Your brain's picking up on all of that, expanding your linguistic toolbox, even if you don't realize it.
Yeah.
And then when you do speak, you have more tools at your disposal. You can articulate your thoughts more clearly, more precisely.
And it's not just vocabulary, right? The research also mentions how reading, whether silently or aloud, helps with pronunciation and fluency.
Absolutely. Even if you're just reading silently, your brain is still engaging those speech-related areas. You're subtly practicing the rhythm, the intonation, the natural flow of language. It's like a mental rehearsal.
It's like you're warming up those language muscles, even if you're not, giving a speech.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you have the grammatical structures, the syntax. You're constantly exposed to well-written sentences, to complex ideas expressed in a clear and concise way. And your brain is absorbing all of that, internalizing those rules, making it easier for you to then construct your own well-formed sentences when you speak.
So it's like by reading, you're training your brain to process and produce language more effectively, even if it's not happening out loud.
Exactly. And if we bring in the motor science aspect here, think about it. Articulation, the physical act of speaking, is a motor skill. It's controlled by specific areas of your brain, like Broca's area.
Right, the part of the brain associated with speech production.
Precisely. And research suggests that reading, even silently, actually strengthens the neural pathways in these areas. It's like by processing language, your brain is giving those speech muscles a workout, making your articulation smoother, more effortless.
So it's like reading is a form of cross-training for your speech muscles. You're strengthening those connections even without actively speaking.
That's a great analogy. It really highlights how reading can have these surprising benefits that extend beyond just, understanding the words on the page.
All right, so we're becoming more articulate readers. That's great. But what about understanding? How does reading help us really grasp those really complex ideas, those dense topics that make your head spin? That's where I think the speech interpretation side of things comes in.
Absolutely. And this is where it gets really interesting because we're not just talking about reading the words. We're talking about comprehending them, building meaning, and really integrating that knowledge into our understanding of the world.
So it's about taking those words and turning them into something meaningful in our own minds.
Exactly. And the research points to something called instance-guided object learning, or IGOL, as a key process here. Now, I know that sounds a bit technical,
IG.
but think of it like this. Imagine you're trying to learn about a new topic, let's say, different types of trees. So you start reading about them, looking at pictures, maybe even seeing some trees in person.
Yeah.
Each of those experiences is an instance. And as you encounter more and more instances, your brain starts to piece together a bigger picture. It starts to form a mental model of what defines a tree, what distinguishes different types of trees.
So it's like instead of just memorizing a list of facts about trees, you're actually building a mental framework for understanding them.
Exactly, and that's what IGL is all about. It's that process of taking individual pieces of information, those instances, and building a cohesive understanding, a mental model of the concept. And this is where the DMN, that internal storyteller we talked about earlier, comes back into play, because it helps connect those new instances from the book to your existing knowledge and experiences. It helps you make those connections to see how this new information fits into the bigger picture of what you already know.
It's like the DMN is helping you weave those individual threads into a tapestry of understanding.
I love that analogy. It really captures the essence of it. And books, especially nonfiction books, often present information in a structured, logical way, building arguments step by step. And this is incredibly helpful for the brain because it provides a framework, a scaffolding for understanding complex topics.
Yeah.
It's like the author is guiding you through the process of building that mental model.
So it's not just about the information itself, it's about how it's presented, how it's structured, that helps the brain make sense of it.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you have critical reading. When you're actively questioning the author, analyzing the arguments, evaluating the evidence, you're engaging your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for higher level thinking, for reasoning, for logic. And that further strengthens your understanding, makes it more nuanced, more insightful.
So it's like the more actively you engage with the text, the deeper your understanding becomes.
Absolutely. And this is where that concept of brainpage modules from the research comes in.
Yeah.
Because all of this mental work, all of this connecting and analyzing, it's not just happening in the abstract, it's physically shaping your brain. You're building these structured neural pathways, these brainpage modules that allow you to quickly access and apply that knowledge. They become like mental filing cabinets, but much more dynamic, much more interconnected.
All right, so we've got these mental filing cabinets organized and ready to go, but there's another fascinating aspect of reading that I wanted to touch on, and that's this idea of developing story-making skills. Now, when I first read that, I thought, story-making, what does that have to do with learning? But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense.
Yeah, story making might seem like a strange concept to connect to learning, but it's actually incredibly profound because our brains are fundamentally wired for narrative. We think in stories, we make sense of the world through stories, and that ability, that story-making skill, is crucial for so much more than just reading a novel.
So it's not just about entertainment, it's about how our brains are wired to process information.
Exactly. And there's a specific area of the brain that plays a key role in this.
Yeah.
The posterior cingulate cortex. It's deep inside the brain, and it's involved in memory, in self-reflection, and crucially, in creating coherent narratives from the information we encounter. It's a part of our brain that helps us take all those disparate pieces of information and weave them into a meaningful story.
It's the screenwriter of our brains, constantly working to make sense of our experiences.
I love that. And think about how important that is, not just for understanding a book, but for everything we do. When you're writing an email, you're telling a story. When you're giving a presentation, you're telling a story. When you're explaining a complex problem, you're telling a story.
It's like storytelling is the fundamental way we communicate and make sense of things.
Exactly. And reading, especially fiction, is like a masterclass in storytelling. It immerses you in these narratives, these beautifully crafted stories, and your brain is soaking it all up. It's learning how to structure a narrative, how to create compelling characters, how to build tension, how to resolve conflict. And all of that translates into your own ability to communicate effectively, to tell your own stories in a way that engages and resonates with others.
So reading fiction isn't just about escaping into a different world. It's about honing those essential communication skills.
Precisely. And it goes even deeper than that. Because reading also strengthens your ability to visualize, to form mental images. When you're reading a story, you're not just passively taking in words, you're creating a movie in your mind. You're imagining the characters, the setting, the action. And that ability to visualize is crucial for so many things. It helps with comprehension, it helps with problem solving, it even helps with creativity.
It's like reading is training your brain to see the world in a more vivid, more detailed way.
Exactly. And this ties back to the motor science aspect we talked about earlier. Because when you're deeply immersed in a story, your brain is actually simulating actions, simulating events, even if you're just sitting still. And this mental simulation can have a real impact on your ability to learn and apply knowledge.
So it's like by reading about something, by imagining it happening, your brain is almost rehearsing those actions, making it easier to then perform them in real life.
Yes. It's like a mental workout for your brain. And the more you read, the more you practice this mental simulation, the more fluid and adaptable your thinking becomes. It's like you're training your brain to be more flexible, more creative, more able to handle unexpected situations.
Wow. That's pretty mind-blowing, isn't it? The idea that reading can actually change the way our brains function, the way we think and learn.
It is. And it really highlights the power of this seemingly simple act. Picking up a book, getting lost in a story. It's not just a pastime. It's a powerful tool for shaping your brain, for expanding your capabilities.
Now, all of this feeds into something that the research calls the brainpage school model. And tell us a bit more about that. What is it and how does it differ from, traditional education?
So the brainpage school model is really a paradigm shift in how we think about learning. It moves away from this traditional model of, the teacher standing at the front of the classroom lecturing and the students passively absorbing information. Instead, it puts the emphasis on active, self-directed learning with reading at the core.
So it's less about being told what to think and more about actively constructing your own understanding.
Exactly. It's about empowering students to become their own knowledge architects. And reading is the key tool for doing that. Because when you're reading, you're not just passively receiving information, you're actively engaging with it, you're making connections, you're building those brain page modules, you're creating those mental models.
And this active engagement, this deeper processing, that's what leads to real learning, to knowledge that sticks.
Exactly. And one of the big benefits of this model is that it reduces cognitive load. Because information in books is often presented within a narrative structure, it's easier for the brain to process, to organize, to remember. It's not just a jumble of facts, it's a story, a journey, something that makes sense.
So it's like by tapping into our natural inclination for stories, for narrative, we can learn more effectively, more efficiently.
Absolutely. And then there's the motor science aspect. Because this active engagement with the text, this process of building brain pages, it's not just happening in the abstract. It's physically shaping the brain, strengthening those neural pathways, making those connections more robust.
It's like you're not just reading the words, you're sculpting your brain.
Exactly. And that's what makes this model so powerful. It's not just about acquiring knowledge. It's about developing the mental tools, the cognitive skills to learn effectively throughout your life.
Now, the research seems pretty optimistic about the future of learning. What's the takeaway message there? Where do they see all of this heading?
The overall message is one of hope, really. It's this idea that despite all the distractions, all the noise in the world today, deep, engaged reading remains one of the most powerful tools we have for learning, for growing, for expanding our understanding of the world.
It's like in a world of, quick snippets and sound bites, there's still something profoundly valuable about slowing down, picking up a book, and really immersing yourself in those ideas.
Absolutely. And the research suggests that this is just the beginning. As we learn more about the brain, about how we learn, about the power of reading, we can develop even more effective strategies, even more engaging learning experiences that tap into this incredible potential.
So it's like we're just scratching the surface of what's possible.
Exactly. And that's what's so exciting. It's this idea that by understanding how our brains learn, how reading shapes our thinking, we can unlock a whole new level of learning, a deeper, more meaningful, more lasting kind of learning.
Well, that's a pretty inspiring thought to end on, isn't it? The idea that we can all become more effective learners, more engaged thinkers, simply by picking up a book.
I think so. It's a reminder that the power to learn, to grow, to change, it's right there in our hands. It's in every book we open, every story we explore, every idea we encounter.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? About the last book you read, the last idea that really resonated with you, and how that might have subtly shifted your perspective, broadened your understanding, made you a little bit wiser. And for those of you interested in diving deeper into this, the source mentions a Taxshila journey and something called learnography. Definitely worth checking out if you're curious.
Absolutely. And ultimately, it's about recognizing the profound impact that reading can have on our lives. It's about expanding our vocabulary, yes, but it's also about deepening our understanding of complex ideas, mastering the art of storytelling, and becoming more active, more engaged, more self-directed learners. It's about harnessing the power of reading to shape our minds, to shape our futures.
It's about becoming lifelong learners.
Exactly. And that, I think, is a journey worth taking.